morning. Hey, there's my voice. How's everybody doing? So, you remember I talk a lot about excuse buckets. We use this at work when people come up with excuses or when they try to pull an excuse out. We're going to use this today. And in case you can't see it from where you're sitting, let me just put a light on it. There we go. Everybody see it okay? That's the excuse bucket we're going to talk about today. All right, let me get myself situated because I was just driving literally 90 miles an hour to get here from Alton campus. So thank you, Jesus. He took the wheel. So I haven't been here for a while, as Pastor Darren said. I opened up summer, and thank God I'm closing it today, right? I'm going to get in touch with my inner Southern belle and say, happy fall, y'all. It is here, yes. So today we're starting a two-part series this weekend and next weekend on excuses. And today we're going to talk about how God can use anyone, hang-ups and all. And next week we're going to talk about God is looking for someone. So be here for the series to keep moving forward. So I'm super excited about this. So I thought I would start by just sharing with you what Webster has to say about the meaning of excuses. And you can see it's not so favorable. So Webster says a verb, if we use excuse as a verb, is to attempt to lessen the blame, to seek to defend or justify. Or as a noun, it's a reason or an explanation to defend or justify a fault or excuse. Or offense. Oops, Freudian slip. So if we look at the synonym, which for those of you who, like me, learned what a synonym is way too late in my life. A synonym, you remember S is the same. So, you after every definition is a synonym and an antonym. If I talk like my brother, the antonym would be opposite if you want to do the A. So a synonym, which means to justify, to defend, to rationalize, to condone. So it's not a positive word, however you use the word excuse. And so today, that's what I want to talk to you about. And while we're talking about the memory game on remembering something based on the letter, everybody knows we have good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, right? But a lot of people get it confused. What's HDL? What's LDL? Well, here's how you remember. The H means happy, the happy cholesterol, and the L means lousy. HL, right? Okay. See, you don't come to church just to hear about Jesus. Okay. Well, I'm going to come down hard on you today because this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Because as a leadership coach and a teacher, I see excuses holding people back every single day. In fact, it's the number one reason why people are not where they need to be and not closer to their destiny than they should be. So I believe excuses are lies. Excuses are hiding places. Some of us call that our comfort zone. Excuses are hang-ups, justified. Oh boy, who knows a good justifier? Listen, you ever need help? I can help you with that too because I can justify with the best of them. I think excuses conceal the blame game. And here's the deal on all of these definitions from excuses. I believe that most people, it's just an awareness thing, that they think of excuses as just like one or two things. Excuses can envelop your entire life and infiltrate your entire life. I believe that excuses are a form of procrastination because we just don't want to do it now. And I think excuses provide a lazy, easy way out. But the bottom line is this: excuses hold you back big time. And excuses aren't just what you hear other people saying or what you hear yourself saying. Most excuses are right between our ears. They're happening inside our head as we're playing the justification or the blame game or whatever it is that we want to call the things that are holding us back. So let's look at some famous quotes, bless you, from some famous people in our history. Benjamin Franklin, he says, "He that is good for making excuses is seldom good at anything else." Or how about Mark Twain? He said, "There are 1,000 excuses for failure, but never a good reason." And then we have someone current, Carolina Panthers quarterback Cam Newton. He said, I hate excuses. Excuses are a disease. And they are. They will eat you from the inside out. Okay, how about this one from George Washington, our first president? It's better to have no excuse than a bad one. And then there's George Washington Carver. 99% of failures come from people who have the habit of making excuses. It really can become a habit. Because you know what? You like make them and you're like, whoa, I got out of that. Whoo, let me try this one. Oh, wow, check it out. That one worked too. So they really do become habitual. So maybe it's just time that we have to break a habit that we've picked up. And then Zig Ziglar, one of my favorites, who's gone to be with the Lord, but he was a great motivational speaker, a man of God. But he said, put all excuses aside and remember this. You are able. And then just a few more that I like that I don't know who claimed them, so I probably will. You'll probably see them on my Facebook soon. Winners don't make excuses. It's one or the other. You're either a winner or excuse maker. And then make excuses or get results. One or the other. And then finally, we can't deposit excuses in the form of moolah. But we're going to deposit our excuses over the next week. We're getting rid of them once and for all. Okay, so what about God? Where does he stand on excuses? He doesn't. Let me just go right to the punchline on that one. Because he's not a God of excuses. He's a God of promises. So honestly, for every one excuse you can come up with, you can find 1,000 promises in the Bible as an antidote and reverse it. These are just a few. I did 11. First I was going to do 5, and then I couldn't stop at 5, then 10, and then I went 10 plus 1. I should have done 10.5. So God says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I knew the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. Now, just 1 and 2 alone shows you that you have no reason to use an excuse because of those 2 monumental promises. If God can be for you, who can be against you? How about ask and you will receive? You know, a lot of people are like, I just can't, I just don't. I'm like, well, ask. I mean, the worst God could say is no, right? And then you're just no further along or behind than you were before. Seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open to you. How about my go-to, number 5? No weapon formed against you shall prosper. I can't tell you how many times I say that, and now I've even psyched myself into saying I have to say it out loud. It doesn't matter what weird person is standing before me that I'm afraid of. And they look at me like, whoa, what's going on here? So I say it anytime I have negative thoughts. You know, instead, some people say, stand behind me, Satan. I say, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. It works, big time. Okay, what about with God? All things are possible. What things? All things, yeah. He didn't put any limits on that, did he? No excuses, no limits. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. Yeah, that's part of where our excuses come from. Like, what is the problem with us that we can't just be still, just zip it? We have to fill in. Well, just stop. Don't come up with an excuse. Just stop it. Well, if God can be for me, who can be against me? Yeah, just say it. Speak his words right back to him. You can do all things through Christ who strengthens. Don't pull it off. Here's a good for the procrastinators. Who are procrastinators in the audience? I'm your president of your club, so this one's for us. It says, don't put it off. Do it now. Don't rest until you do. Because guess what? When you rest, what comes after you decide to rest? More rest. More excuses on why you need to rest some more, right? Okay, anyone who belongs to Christ is a new person. Who belongs to Christ in this house? Everybody? Right. So listen, if you belong to him, you're a new person, your past is forgotten, and everything is new. No excuses. So stop looking in the rearview mirror. It doesn't matter. And then this is one I had to add at the end. I felt like God was speaking to me to put this. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways. So that's why you will never find God coming up with an excuse. He's going to get super mad and frustrated. And I'll tell you a story about when he got PO'd. We know what that stands for. Okay, what about your hang-ups? Do you find yourself anywhere in this list? Are you too old or too young? Is it too late? Yeah, that train's left the station. You using that excuse? Or are you too young? Or it's too early? It's really too early for me to jump in here. It's like, really? Yeah, I think you could have jumped in like 16 years ago. How about, are you too big or too tall? Probably out of all of these, those are two I've not used. Too little, too short, too round. How about I don't have the money. I just don't have the time. I don't have the education. These make me crazier than I really am when I hear these. Do you know that some of the richest people on this planet do not have an education? So give it up. It is only an excuse that you're holding yourself back for. And then what about, I don't have the right job. I didn't have the right upbringing. I don't have the support that I need at home, at work, wherever. Listen, you and God are a majority. That's all you need to know. You don't need anyone else's support. You and God are a majority, period, and end of story. It's too hard. It's too scary. The new term in the business world, and many of you have probably heard it, and so you'll hear my voice now from now on when you hear it, it's too heavy of a lift. That's the new term for that's too hard for us. We really don't want to do it. It's an excuse. And I just say, it ain't too heavy for me to lift. Get on out of the way. I'll lift it. But that's the new term, and it's just another form of excuse. I'm different. How about if your difference is actually your destiny? What about that? I love what Coco Chanel says, girls. You know who I'm talking about. It's those CC guys, that cost $5,000 for a bag that's like this big. Yeah, she big time. But Coco says, in order to be irreplaceable, one must be different. Celebrate your difference. Maybe your difference is the difference maker. Okay? How about I've screwed up? My mistakes, I've made all these mistakes, poor decisions, I've disappointed the entire world, or I failed. All of that is past tense. It's over. There is nothing you can do to change that except apologize for the people that you've hurt and move on. Use your failure to jumpstart what it is God has in store for you. Stop looking in that little bitty rearview mirror and look out in front of you. That's what's going to be what changes your life. Or my favorite, it's not my fault. It's his fault. He left me. He called me fat. It's like, come on, it's her fault. It's her fault. Or it's their fault. So, yeah, all of these things really stink, and maybe they really are true in your world. They're your hang-ups. But we've got to stop hiding behind them because it's just going to hold us back. So, you're not in bad company if you found yourself in some of those hang-ups, or maybe some of these. These are biblical characters. Check it out. Abraham, he was old. Elijah was suicidal. Joseph was abused. Job, he went bankrupt. Moses, he was a stuttering murderer. How about Gideon? He was afraid. Samson was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. Samaritan woman, she was divorced. Noah was drunk. Jeremiah was young. Jacob was a cheater. David was an adulterous murderer. Jonah ran right into the whale's belly as he was running from God. Naomi was a widow. Peter denied Christ not once, not twice, but 3 times. He just kept going back for more. Martha was a worrier and a whiner. Anybody know any of those kind of people? All right. Zacchaeus was small and money hungry. The disciples fell asleep while they were supposed to be praying. And then St. Paul, who wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else, he was a Christian bounty hunter. So get over yourself. You're not in bad company. There are a lot of people who have some history, but it did not hold them back. So what about the blame game? Any blame gaming going on as a form maybe of your excuse? Blaming is really living in the past. It's holding a grudge, right? Because if you're blaming someone, you're living on something someone did in the past. That's called a grudge. And a grudge will rob you of your future because it's keeping you in the past. And holding a grudge is literally like drinking poison and expecting someone else to get sick. You drink it, you suffer. so many things that we hold a grudge on. The people don't even know that we're still pissed at them. It's so hilarious. They're like going through life, like life is good. And you're like, they don't even know. It's so ridiculous. Okay, you guys know this lovely couple, right? Here's where it all started. It's their fault. You remember that God told them one thing not to do, just one thing. He said, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They couldn't not do one thing. And then the blame game started. Adam said, it was the woman you gave me who gave me the fruit, and I ate it. Now, in today's time, that would be being an obedient husband, right? We make their meal, they eat it. That's how it goes. You know, happy wife, happy life. But it didn't work for this one. And then Eve blamed the serpent. The serpent deceived me. That's why I ate it. It's like, no, you ate it because you disobeyed. Done. And now you're going to suffer the consequences. So the Bible is littered with excuse makers, but it started with the very first couple. So what about lies? I believe excuses are lies because 99% of them aren't even right. We're just trying to buy time, buy whatever. I told you earlier. But I thought I would just expose myself on a lie that I'm guilty of telling myself. I can skip church and just watch it online. You look good online, by the way, PD. You look good. How about all of you online right now? Let me just speak to you for a second. You comfy? You comfy in your pajamas? Yeah. Been there, done that. But the word says, okay? So the word actually tells us that we need to consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together. Right? As some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another. This is where it happens. Now, it happens everywhere. We come to get charged up and then go out, and then we live in such a way that those who don't know God want to know God because they know us. But this is where we plug in and get charged up. And then he goes on to say in Matthew, for where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with you. I really wish the scripture would have said where 3 or more gather together. Because I can justify, because it's me and my husband in our jammies watching it online. So I'm just going to stick to where 3 or more gather together. Is that cool with you guys? And then someday. Anybody have someday excuse? You or know someone that does? Well, someday. Someday I'm going to do that. Someday I'm going to take that class. Someday I'm going to quit this job and go for it. Someday. So I thought we could just review a calendar together today. So we can just get it on your calendar. All right, so this is a calendar that I'm just familiar with. Our company publishes it to the healthcare world. It's medical observances, and it's also just some fun things that physician liaisons can entertain their offices that they're calling on, like Friday was Taco Day. You know, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so they take pink pumpkins out everywhere. So there's lots of activity going on. I mean, there's Halloween and Taylor Gall's birthday. That's on a Thursday this month, October 31st. And so there's a lot going on. So this week is Physician Assistant Week. So let's look. Someday. There's Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. There is no someday in October. Weird. Well, we're not going to get to it in October. Let's try November. Okay, let's see. Well, there's Thanksgiving. That's on a Thursday. Oh, Black Friday. That's November. And Sunday. Oh, Sunday. Don't forget, November 3rd, we set our clocks back. So, that's Deviled Eggs Day for those of you who like that nasty stuff. Okay, so let's look. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Anybody see someday? Anybody? Not in November either. That's because there's no such thing as someday. You need to get rid of it from your vocabulary. There's really no reason to use someday at all. So just wipe it out. Ready? Everybody? Take a deep breath. Let it out. Someday. It's gone. Don't say it again. Okay, so how about diversion plans? That's sometimes an excuse. We're just going to, divert that. We may not say the word that we don't know anymore, that one word we were just talking about. But we're going to divert it. And so, you know the cliche, the devil's in the details? Everybody knows that. Oh, the devil's in the details. I believe the devil's in the details in almost every excuse that you have. That's his way to suck us down. I believe, let this sink in, if the devil can keep you busy, keeping your attention diverted until you're dead, he'll be able to get you to do to you what he does not have the ability to do. Let that sink in. He'll help you help yourself to disaster. So he'll sit there and play his fiddle while your life goes up in smoke. Speaking of devil and fiddles, how many remember that Charlie Daniels song, The Devil Went Down? We might have a little surprise for you. You the man. You my man. The devil went down to O'Fallon. He was looking for a soul to steal. He was in a bind because he was way behind. He was looking to make a deal. When he came up on this church, living excuse-free and not going to stop, the devil jumped up on this stage top and said, "Church, let me tell you what. I guess you didn't know it, but I made great excuses too. And if you care to take a dare, I'll make a bet with you. Now, you bust a pretty good excuse, church, but give a devil his due. I'll bet a life of gold against your soul because I think I'm better than you." Church said, "Our name's Enjoy Church, and it might be a sin, but I'll take your bet and you're going to regret because we're stronger than we've ever been. Hold on to your focus, church, and work it really hard because hell's broke loose in O'Fallon and the devil deals the cards. And if you win, excuses will never take control. But if you lose, the devil will get your soul." The devil opened up his case and he said, "I'll start this show," and fire flew from his fingertips as he rosined up his bow. Then he pulled the bow across the strings and it made an evil hiss. And a band of demons joined in and it sounded something like this. Woo! Yeah! When the devil finished, church said, "Well, you're pretty good, old son. But sit down in this chair right here. Let us show you how it's done." They played Fire on the Mountain. Run, boys, run. We didn't come this far not to get things done. We know our purpose now that we're made for more. Today we're busting through that excuse door. Woo! Now the devil bowed his head because he knew that he'd been beat. And he laid that golden excuse-free life on the ground at the church's feet. Church said, "Devil, just come on back if you ever want to try again. We done told you once, you son of excuse. We're the best that's ever been." Woo! Thank you to my band. Thank you to my band. I've always wanted to say that. Yeah, he just said, if you didn't hear, they just learned that backstage. That's how talented our band is. That's right. Woo! All right, that's awesome. All right, so tonight, I hope you enjoyed the little extra entertainment today. So our whole foundational scripture for this series can be found in Ephesians, and I love it because it says God is able to do far more than we have ever dared to ask or even dream. And of infinity beyond, look at your neighbor and say, "To infinity and beyond." Our highest prayers, desires, thoughts, and hopes. Is that so encouraging? The fact of the matter is the devil will try and try and try and try to come down, but we can defeat the devil. Because why? Because you and the God are a majority. You are an army that can defeat everything that Satan brings to you. So I believe that one reason we struggle with excuses is because we compare our behind the scenes life, reality, they call it, with everyone else's highlight reel. called social media sometimes. You know, last Saturday night, I was headed to my 40th high school class reunion, and my husband and I graduated together, so I was taking a picture of us. He was driving, and I took the first picture and looked at him like, yeah, no, you have 3 chins. Okay, let's try it again. You know, took it. Okay, you're down to 2. Keep going. I probably took 40 attempts at making that picture. I didn't use any filters, but I did make sure that chins, I was trying to, you know. And people would say, oh, that was the cutest picture of you and Jeff. And I was like, yeah, thanks. It was 40 takes. Because they saw, you know, the highlight reel, not all that work, you know, let me make it. Okay, try it again. All right. So what about this picture? Case in point, this guy, Moses. Most of us remember these 2 main highlight reel scenes of Moses' life, right? The parting of the Red Sea and when he brought down the 10 Commandments. Occasionally people will say, what else do you remember about Moses? They'll remember him being put into a basket as a baby and sent into the river, right? So you remember when he's 3 months and when he's 80. There's a lot that happened between those times. So I want to talk about what happened before this rescue story. So maybe you'll be encouraged and know that you're not going to go the round that he went. So Moses' life is kind of in 3. You know, first 40, he was uptown. Second 40, he was downtown. The next 40, he went around town. Right? But really his life is made up of some pretty exciting and interesting pieces that I think we can learn by. Now, if you're not familiar, Moses is in Exodus, which is the second book of the Old Testament. Genesis ends with Joseph dying. And you guys remember Joseph. Joseph was sold to slavery by his own brothers. He landed up in Egypt, in the house that he worked. He ended up rising to the top and in Potiphar's house. And so he, you know, which was, I think, the top guard of Egypt. But anyway, he was up there. And so Potiphar's wife wanted a piece of Joseph, if you know what I mean. And so he did not want a piece of her. So she accused him of busting a move on her, and he was sent to prison because of it. Falsely accused, spent 14 years in prison. You will not read one excuse that man made. He just kept living it out. And finally he got out. He again, God raised him, elevated his life to second in command of Egypt. He ended up saving a country from famine. And also his own family, who the brothers ended up coming back buying food, and he ends up revealing himself to his brothers and then relocates his whole family. And there was somewhere in the 100, maybe 70 guys, and so double that with women. But there were only around 100 or 2 that ended up coming, max. So now it works its way, Genesis, and Moses dies. God goes silent. For 4 centuries, not decades, centuries, 400 years, God is silent. In that 400 years, the fertile population multiplied and then some. So Joseph's family multiplied to in the millions. So now we're in Exodus, and Pharaoh, which is a fancy word for the king of Egypt, is concerned about how big and mighty this population is. And so he wants to do something about it to kind of, control the population. So all of these, now they're slaves to Egypt, and they're building cities, and they are workhorses. And Pharaoh decides that he's going to control the population, so he tells all the Egyptian foremen to turn up the heat on the workload of these guys, so they will be too tired to multiply, if you know what I mean. But they weren't. They were some strong men. So they just kept multiplying. So his next trick was to call in the nurse midwives who delivered the Hebrew babies and said, listen, anytime you deliver a boy baby, I want you to kill him and throw him into the Nile River. Well, those nurse midwives were not going to fall on the direction of a bad dictator and use it as an excuse. Well, my boss told me to do this wrong thing, so I'm going to do it. That's an excuse from the devil, people. Your boss tells you to do something wrong, you say, what? No. Or hail to the no, whichever you need to, you got to judge the mood in the room at the time. But they didn't fall for it, so the population continued to grow. So then Pharaoh took it in his own hands, and he sent down an edict that his people were to kill all the boy babies that were 2 years of age and younger. So it started happening. So in comes in the story of Moses, and his mother's like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm figuring something out. So at 3 months old, she gets a basket, she fills it with tar, and she puts Moses in it and sends it down the Nile. Now, his sister follows along with him as the basket is going down the river, as it lands, coincidentally, in the bathhouse or the bathing area of Pharaoh's sister, who's there. And she sees this baby in the basket, and of course, oh, it's so cute. I got to keep it. It's like a puppy. So she keeps it, and then Miriam, Moses' sister, is still kind of watching and listening, and she's like, but I won't be able to feed the baby. I didn't have it. I need to find someone who can feed it. And Miriam's like, I know someone. And so Moses' mother ends up continuing to breastfeed and raising this little boy as his nurse or nanny for Pharaoh's sister. So she stayed in. So we have that, first of all, he was released. Now he's been rescued. Now he's being raised in the palace, but also with his mother's influence. So I can't find in the Bible where he's told that he's really not Egyptian, he's Hebrew. But we think that his mom is whispering to him throughout this time saying, you're not one of them. Because somehow, suddenly he knows he's not one of them, and he's 40 years old, and now he's going rogue. So he goes out and he's watching, all the Egyptian foremen, whipping all these Hebrew slaves, and he intervenes one day, and he busts the foreman who's beaten one of the slaves and kills him. He becomes a murderer, and he's a murderer because he literally had the authority to say, knock it off, and he didn't. Instead, he killed him. So the next day, he goes out again, and today he sees 2 Hebrew brothers fighting. So Moses walks up, he's like, knock it off, you two. You're brothers, for crying out loud, love each other. And they're like, who do you think you are? Like, who made you judge and jury? What are you going to do, kill us like you did the foreman yesterday? And he's like, whoa, busted. So obviously, the person that he saved went back and told everyone. And Pharaoh also found out it was Moses, and now Pharaoh is coming after Moses to kill him. So he runs out into the desert, starting his second 40. So he gets out to the desert, and now he is at the well, and he meets his future wife, where he ends up staying for the next 40 years, just hanging out in the desert with the sheep. And then we come upon his encounter with the burning bush. So he's just out minding his own business with the sheep. He sees this bush burning, which is nothing really uncommon in the desert. It's hot, it's dry, things catch on fire all the time. But this fire wasn't going out, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. So it just wasn't normal. Well, spoiler alert, if it's God, it won't be normal. Because if God is on the scene, something big is happening. So it won't feel normal to us humans. You follow me? So that might be a sign. So he turns to look. He acknowledges it, which is sometimes what we've missed doing. And that's when God said, Moses. I need to say a little bit more powerful, like in the 10 Commandments. Moses. And Moses said, here I am. And I cannot tell you how many people have said to me and Pastor Darren and Laura, like after a message, like I felt like you were talking right to me. Like, were you talking to me? Did you have a camera in my house? Listen, that's God. That is a God thing. And I think that that's when, we have to acknowledge when we're hearing those kind of things, we have to turn and look. We can't just let it go. I think one of the reasons that we don't get more is that God hasn't seen us do much with what he's already given us. So if you're feeling like, I never get that kind of sign, there's your sign. Okay? So when God gives you something you have never seen before and cannot explain, don't ignore it. Turn and look. For God in the midst of it, because God may be trying to reveal himself to you. So I know that even at work, when I see some extraordinary kindness towards us individually in our company or to our company, I used to think, wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, they like me. I'm really good. And finally, I'm like, yeah, no, Tammy, you had nothing to do with it. That's God. And so now I glorify him because I do not want it to stop. I'm like, thank you, Lord, for that. I did not even know why they like me. Obviously, you've got something planned, right? So again, we get so busy in our life that we just blow that stuff off as good day. Wow, my hair must look good today. They were nice. You know what I mean? Stupid stuff. But it happens every single day. We blow off when God's trying to get our attention. So turn and look, knowing that it may be God. So here's the deal. Everything was really good in this conversation. Moses, here I am. Until then God answered and said what he wanted Moses to do. You know, that not normal stuff. He's like, I want you to go back to the scene of the crime. And I want you to take all those people, all of them, women, men, children, millions of them. You know, like I want you to take Texas and Arizona and I want you to move it on up here to Chicago. Is that a problem? Or Illinois? Is that a problem? So that's why he's like, oh, and that's where the excuses started. And that's where he said, wait. You talking to me? Are you talking to me? That's exactly what Moses protested. He said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, go to the king, the president of the United States? Who am I that should lead the Israelites out of Egypt? So you have a handout, and so maybe one of your excuses is, I'm not. Who am I? That's your excuse. Maybe you fill that in. Maybe that's going to be one of your first excuses if you haven't already started kind of coming to grips with something that you tell yourself over and over again. So Moses protested. You got to laugh. Moses protested with God. Oh, wait. We do that all the time. All the time. But we read this and we think he's like quackadoodle for even thinking about arguing with God. So Moses said to God next. First he doubted himself. Now he's going to actually doubt the Almighty God. Moses said, well, suppose I go to the Israelites and I say to them, the God of your fathers have sent me, and they ask me, well, what's his name? What am I going to tell them? God said, I am who I am. Right? He wasn't going to argue. He wasn't going to say, tell him this and tell him this and tell him here's what I look like, here's what I smell like, here's what I'm going to do. And he's like, I am who I am. That's what you say to the Israelites. Bam. That was it. It was like, it's not about you, bud. And that's what so happens when we're given this assignment or we feel like this is the direction we need to go in. And then we start getting hung up. It's like, I'm going to look so stupid if I walk up and say, hey, I'm really interested in joining that committee. In joining that. I'm really interested in joining your company. What do I need to do to kind of start gearing myself up? I'm really interested in whatever it is. Because we start thinking about how we'll look. What will they think of us? Listen, if it's God's plan for you, you need to stop worrying about what it's going to look like for you. So then we play the what if game. So Moses said, well, what if they don't believe me or listen to my voice? Suppose, or what if they say, the Lord has not appeared to you? So God had mercy on him. He's like, okay, let me give you a couple things because I know this is scary. And when we are vulnerable and feel like we're going to look weird, we get scared and the excuses start coming. Just naturally, it's human nature. Don't beat yourself up. Just become aware of it and stop it. So he shows him a couple things. He gives him a couple tools. One, God said, what's that thing in your hand? He said, that's a rod, it's a staff. He's like, throw it down. So he threw it down and it turned into a cobra. That's pretty scary. He's like, now pick it up by the tail. Now, I don't know if you know much about snakes. I personally do not, but the one thing I do know is if it's a cobra, run like hell. And the second is don't pick it up by the tail. That's what I know. That's like so easy to me. But God said, pick it up by the tail. And so he obeyed. He picked it up and it turned right back into the staff. So he goes, well, if they don't believe that, knowing that there were some magicians who could do that as well, he's like, hey, stick your hand in your robe. So he stuck his hand in his robe. Moses pulled out. He had leprosy. He's like, argh. And Moses said, okay, stick it back in, stuck it back in, pulled it back out. It was gone. He's like, show him that. And he said, one more thing, if they don't believe either of those things, then take some water out of the Nile, dump it on the ground, and it'll turn to blood. Then they'll believe you. So God wouldn't allow Moses to hide behind his natural fear, but God did equip him. And that's where we have to know that if God calls us, God will equip you, but oftentimes it's not until you show faith that you believe. And then he's going to give you what you need. So he was throwing Moses a bone or a snake to help him out. But Moses continues to do what we continue to do even after that. Then Moses said, oh, Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you've spoken to your servant. I'm slow to speech and tongue. So I'm going to call up on this. I'm going to call his bluff. Because we know we have biblical evidence of his great speeches. So we're back again to he's just afraid. How about any of you? I mean, I speak for a living, but sometimes people at the last minute are like, hey, would you also talk about this? I'm like, I don't really know much about that. You know, it's like, come on. It's suddenly I can't speak. And I think that happens to us. We're like, hey, I need for you to do this. You're like, whoa. You know, it's just change. It's something too fast without warning. So we start throwing out excuses. And here's what was happening here. It's like God wouldn't choose you if he either wouldn't equip you or doesn't know you are completely gifted to do what he's asking you to do. So this was scary request to go to the king, right? So there was really reasons, but God was trying to use him and humble him to be able to use him as his servant. The thing about this whole message around Moses is it wasn't just about Moses. The people, the Israelites finally cried out to God and said, rescue us. So God was doing two things at one time. He had been, Moses had been out in the desert sucking his sandy thumb, and the people in Egypt were too proud to reach out to God. So finally they all came together at the same time, and God is using them. So God starts getting really mad at him now that he's whining about he is not gifted to speech. He said, who gave man his mouth? Who made him deaf or mute? Who gives him sight or makes him blind? Is it not the Lord? And they said, now go. How many of you as parents have just finally said that to your kid? Now go. I'm done listening to your excuses. Go. And that's what he has to do to us too. Now go. And he said, I will help you speak and teach you what to say. Oh, Moses. Moses, you have to give him credit. You have to be in credit. He finally, out a desperate plea, he says, oh, Lord, please send someone else. Please. He is not giving up. And God burned with anger. That is not the place we want to be. But he said, what about your brother Aaron the Levite? I know he can speak well. He's already on his way to meet you, and his heart will be glad when he sees you. God already knew what Moses needed. He finally needed to say, I've already ordered it. He's already on his way. He didn't say, okay, then I'll call Aaron. He's like, he's on his way. So God knows what we need before we even know we need it. It's about faith. If he's given you and sending you on this direction, how many excuses? I mean, look at this. We're looking at him saying, geez, you could literally see him and you still wouldn't listen or throwing out excuses. So it's going to be doubly hard for us to think, is this God? Is it not? You know what I always say? If it's good, it's God. So that may be a way to measure, like, I feel like someone's telling me to compliment that lady, but that would be weird. It's like, is that good? What if it's not God? What damage have you done? Oh, you made someone's day. Wow. Hope that doesn't hurt. If it's good, it's God. You have to let that be your tiebreaker. So finally, the excuses stopped and the highlight reels begin. So not until our excuses stop will our highlight reels begin. I find comfort knowing that God will never give up on us, but he will allow us to give up on us. It's called free will. So Moses wasted 40 years hiding out in the sandy desert and hiding behind his excuses on why. I mean, he was royalty, and now he's settled to go out there and just, live in a tent. I mean, come on. That's that's sinking down low. So if you think I've gone too far, no, you have not. So we have to stop hiding behind our excuses so that God will put us into the position to live out our destiny. So back to the excuse bucket and back to the sheet that you have that you were given. I want you to really think about what your excuses are. Who wants to live an excuse-free life? Anybody out there? Everyone. Yeah. So maybe today we just need to do a reset together. How many of you see excuses in a little different way than you did when you came in? You think of it, like before it was just like, I'm too whatever. But now it's like, whoa, there's a lot of things going on. So a lot of you there. So let's reset together. Again, I believe most of this is just about becoming aware. That's how we stop things. So next week is part 2 of this. So this week was God will use anyone, and next week God's looking for someone. And there are a million excuses why not, right? There are a million excuses why not. But there's one great reason why your mission, why you should do this, and that's your mission. Why you should give up excuses and start living the life that God has planned for you. But it's your choice. You have to choose. So next week. So I want to end this story with some encouraging words and really an unbelievable no excuse story. How many of you have heard the word, "It is well with my soul"? We're going to be blessed to hear it after this. But I just want to tee it up and let you know this was written by a Christian attorney from Chicago, interestingly enough. And he was hugely successful in his law firm, living the life. And then at the age of 4, his son dies. And the next year, the Great Chicago Fire hit and burned down his massive estate that he had built with the money from his successful law firm. And so the following summer, he sends his wife and 4 daughters on a ship, on a cruise over to Europe, and is going to catch up with them later while he finishes up some work at the firm, and the ship sinks. And he gets a telegram from his wife with only 2 words: saved, alone. So now he's lost all his children. So he goes over, he brings his wife back, and on the way back, he learns that his law firm burnt down. And as he's negotiating with his insurance company, they refused to pay the claim because they said it was an act of God. Wow. What else can go wrong? So now he has no money, no house, no work, no office, and he's lost it all. And while he's sitting and thinking about what's happening to him and being a spiritual guy, he writes this song. Whatever, my Lord, you have taught me to say, it is well. It is well with my soul.